I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 5:31. Item 2, board team building and training. Thank you all for being here. And if you notice, we have Dr. Greg Gibson is back with us. After our last training session, I called him that next morning and we kind of debriefed what happened at the meeting. And I was a little uneasy about the number of answers that were to the left of the agree. So we kind of brainstormed what we could do again to talk about some of that trust issue. That's when he recommended the Speed of Trust book. And we also needed to debrief the governance. So Dr. Gibson is back with us this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
And thank you for having me back. And of course, I bring you greetings from Graham, Texas, that is 4 hours and 47 minutes due north of here. And I literally, but who's counting? I just drove in and I promised Otika I would be back to feed in the morning at 7, so I may be stopping somewhere on the way back. And I was going to change this morning, and I'd looked up and it was too late. So I do have my clean boots. I keep my clean boots in the truck, and so these are my clean boots. And I keep a jacket in the truck. But thank you for letting me be back. And this is relatively common to take the first team trust. So we have two team trust self-questionnaires, and if a district wants to dig a little bit deeper, the first one's more generic. It's based on Kim Blanchard's ABCDs of Trust, which was kind of like the background document for trust, for 30 years. And then we've tweaked the Sean Covey Speed of Trust and made it a little more educational, but it's relatively common for districts to say what you said, President Groner, that, I want to pull on that a little bit more. And so that's what this 13 behaviors is, that's what that is for. So it's, in large part, as we said the first time, a lot of this, it is based on perception and it is based on feelings. So it's hard to just say, hey, let's have a conversation about trust. It's better to quantify it and to capture the perception and then work off of how you numerically quantify it, instead of just getting in a room and saying, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And so I hate to do this again, but the best way so that I do not change your perception on anything on the self-analysis questionnaire is for you to just take it right up front. And then we are going to debrief the good governance inventory. And I think there's nothing in that was really earth-shattering, but there's probably a few things to have a conversation about. And then I have PricewaterhouseCoopers helping me, i.e. Peggy, helping me tabulate results during that part of it. And then we'll be able to debrief tonight. Yes, that's exactly right. But thank you all again for having me back. And I think there's a packet there. And if you'll find the 13 Team Trust Self-Analysis Questionnaire, 13 core behaviors. Everybody have that? If you'll do the same very complicated task of in the upper right-hand corner, making some symbols so that I can fan them out here in a minute and you can pull your copy back. But don't put your name on it. This is meant to be an anonymous, it's not about who said what. It's about what the group collectively thinks together. So in order to preserve that, just put some symbol in the upper right hand. And I'll just note that at the top, it just says we, parentheses, the board as a whole, consistently practice the desired behavior. Now that's really important because that's like your tee-up phrase, and you almost need to say that over and over again as you look at each of the 13 behaviors. Fair enough? And again, I'm not going to say much more because this is just your perception. And there's no right or wrong. It's whatever your gut feeling is.
feel like we as a board consistently practice to talk straight, so you would rate it based on the continuum, right?
Correct. And if you, and thank you for that question, if maybe one of the best ways to say it, if there's something in the way of moving it to the right, this is your opportunity to score it. And if it, let's say that it is talk straight and you think that everybody talks straight, then pick always. But if there's something in the way of that, I always generally go over to the right and then start thinking about it, look at what the, there's a is not here, what it is, and then look at the is not. I kind of believe in positive presupposition. So look at the is, then start thinking, where would I put this? Where would I rate this based on just consistently behaviors that are expressed at the board? And then start moving your way back to the left. I mean, that may be one way to do it.
So the never, seldom, 50%, often, always applies to.
It's to your, this is a team self-assessment, the consistency of the board as a team. So it's not you as an individual.
Right, no,
Yeah.
So it reflects, so when it comes to scoring, I should think of the desired behavior or
Well,
the
probably both. And then just think about the where do you think consistently you fall between the two? It's not a lie or a spin. If you on a Likert scale, which there's a Likert scale's been retrofitted in here, the middle is always the safe ground on if you don't have a strong feeling for one way or the other, if that makes sense. Yeah. But if you have a strong feeling, that's what a Likert is meant to do, is to push you off of middle one way or the other.
And when you're all addressing Mr. Gibson, or Dr. Gibson, I'm sorry, would you please use your mics as we're recording?
And thank you for that, but Dr. Gibson retired last year, so I'm Greg. All right, thank you for that. And so now the debrief of the good governance inventory. And I think in your packet is also a collection of the SWOT analysis. And just in way of introduction, this is not, the purpose of tonight is not to go through there and address. We took a snapshot, unprepared, in that you didn't know you were going to do a SWOT before you got here. And the beauty of that, and the reason I think SWOT analyses are better when you just kind of, you don't prepare people, because you just get the top of mind. You get like what is on the top of everyone's mind. So it's not about addressing the items that are in there. I think that's just a good collection of information from the trustees on that given night of your perception. I know the superintendent and board president and I have already said it appears to be a fair representation of my I had a big page, yellow notepad page. I didn't, put something down 4 times if it appeared 4 times. I just kind of moved it, I power rated it to the top. But I want you all to take 30 seconds and glance at that and just make sure that we didn't miss something from your recollection of that night. It's not necessarily to do an add to it because we were trying to capture your perception that night, but just glance at those real quickly. The superintendent and board president have actually already started thinking, about different things moving forward that may, be addressed, and this is just feedback towards that. So glance at that SWOT analysis real quickly. Is it a fair representation of what was said that night, I guess is my question.
I think it is, but I do have a question. I know you said it's not a time to add to, but we had a meeting after we had this team building, and I think it would be I think we do need to add something to it. We had a former employee come up and talk about employee engagement at that meeting and matters from the floor. And I had kind of briefly spoken to Shannon about it a month prior, just based on what we do in our office. And there is not an employee engagement mechanism within Northeast that actually asks structured questions over a period of time, engages which are those that are important to those employees to assure that they are engaged and satisfied in the workplace.
Would you view that as an opportunity?
It's a great opportunity.
Okay.
I think that we'd be missing out if we didn't ask them how they're doing, not coming from the perspective of HR, but their principal, the principal actually the person they work with every single day, taking a vested interest to know how they are doing.
So I heard 2 things, employee engagement, but I heard a systematic approach to employee engagement also, like you added that.
I think you have to do it that way. You have to be able to have a structured 8 sentences. I'm just throwing them in the air, the number in the air, that asks the same questions, and you look at your data and you see what are the most important pieces where they feel like there's lacking support, and you say, okay, this year we're going to focus on this, and then you ask those questions again and you use the data to see if you've made any changes.
Yep. Okay.
I think that it is a huge opportunity that we're missing if we don't extend and find a program to ask those tough questions.
I would agree 100%, Ms. Winkley, especially because it's the long term for the strategic stuff, which a lot of this good governance is, where year after year we can pick 1 or 2 items. And I know Dr. Micah talked about the principal and staff do a 360 review, but I think also at the higher level so that we have that same level of significant data from them that it's important, like you talk about, so we can look and find how do we have those positive things where we can engage specifically, target it deliberately, and pick 1 or 2 each year, and then build, and we'll have the data if we build a good strategic plan over the 3, 5, 10 years to look where things are working to build that long-term culture sustainment. I agree 100%. I think that'd be a great idea.
So
great
is there consensus then to add that as an opportunity? Systematic approach to employee engagement is how I would capture what you said, and that there was an agreement from another trustee.
So is that employee engagement with the board, or?
No, it's just a general category. It's just workforce engagement. So
Yes.
you have the workforce how many, Dr. Micah, employees? Probably one of the largest employees in the city.
Yeah,
Yeah.
approximately around 87 to 8,800.
Yeah, so probably one of the largest employees in the city. And maybe, trying to think who would be larger than you all within the city limits.
Oh, your health industry will be north
Okay.
side. There are several
So
military.
North side all within San Antonio, I guess they are within, yeah, so, anyway, you're gonna be in the top probably 10, I would think. So it's how do you, do an employee engagement, or sometimes referred to as workforce engagement. How do you do workforce engagement? Which there are protocols to do that already exist, and that already exist in San Antonio.
We do it at our office. We've been doing it the last 3 years, and when we had COVID, we added a few questions because we needed to know if we were being supportive as a company to our employees, and so it can benefit employers, and this is a business. We have, we have employees, and it can benefit. I know it benefits. I've seen it benefit. I've seen it work.
Okay.
And he was here. He's no longer an employee of ours, but to actually take the effort to come back to a board meeting and speak his mind, I think speaks volumes.
All right. Any other? I apologize. Maybe. It's shredding season at our house. I'm not gonna lie. So every day I finish the day on the shredder, trying to get ready for the spring. And of course, I don't wear my mask like I should. Any other thoughts? Thank you for that, Sandy, or Ms. Winkley. Any other thoughts on the SWOT? That's a good addition.
Well, I would just change charters to charter school.
Okay.
And then I think magnet is misspelled.
Okay. That's probably on me, I think. That's on me. Well,
If you're a shipping magnate,
yeah, the problem is spell check. The incorrect word was spelled correctly. That's the problem. And I was probably doing it on my phone. But charter schools and magnet, got it. And that document, by the way, is just some feedback for you all. It's capturing what was said that night. I think it's good to reflect back and think, we took an opportunity, 15 or 20 minutes, took a gut check, and it might have been more closer to 30 minutes probably. And so it's a gut check, and it's good to think back and reflect back on those. Okay, if there's nothing else on SWOT, then we're going to move to the good governance scorecard. Thank you for the water. And of course, on these, you would love over time, with efficacy towards good governance, to max out a scorecard with everything in green. I think you all have President Grona. Does everybody have the governance core book? Is that what I heard upstairs? Okay, this is based on, okay, Sam, hold that up if you don't mind. So this inventory is based on that work. So I don't know if you all had that before. I'm seeing them all over. Okay, so this is aligned to that work. And you could pick any number of works out there and probably establish a governance inventory, aligning with that. But that's probably one of 3 or 4 of, the top documents on, what is governance. I think I shared the last time I was here that, I became a TRS board member, and that was the book that I had to leave Schertz as a superintendent, and by the time I got to Austin, be a board member, and so that was the book that I was using to help me understand how do I be a good board member, not just a superintendent that happens to be on a board for TRS. So all to say, you can accept this as good an inventory as there is out there. If there's some other work that you have some passion about, you could build an inventory based on that work. The key, I think, is similar to what was said about the workplace engagement survey in a different context. Whatever you agree to, stick to it so that you can check it over time. And if you change the inventory every year, you can't track, and you're ideally looking for 3 data points, in order to have a trend. You're trying to find 3 data points at a minimum. And so, here's your starting place. You have one, I'll just say it, you have one that's green, which means that all 7 were a yes response. The yellow ones are the majority of the responses were yes, but not all of them. And then the orange represents the majority of the responses were in no or I don't know. So these are just, if it's all right with you, President Garner, these were just a couple of the observations that I had. So when you get to, and I'm going to ask, generally speaking, we've done this as a Dr. Micah doesn't weigh in because it's board training, but I know, Dr. Micah, if there's something, that you feel like is going to address some of these, please feel free to share. So and I'm going to start with oranges, if that's okay, and we're going to spend a little time on that, and then we can go back and look at the yellow and the green. But if you look at 2, so there's all 3, 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3, all have the majority saying no or don't know on clarity around strategic outcomes, is the bottom line. And the only thing, the good thing about this is that the acknowledgement that there is a lack there is the first step to say, okay, we've got to get clarity around, what these strategic outcomes are. And if you remember the strategic role, the tactical role, and the operational role, this is saying what are the outcomes that we've established at this dais for the tactical team to implement and carry to the front line. So, this is just saying that there's not clarity amongst the board about what those are. Yep.
Do you mind if I chime in?
Absolutely.
Dr. Gibson. So, when I saw this earlier this evening, it in one sense it validated because we have been working here on a plan to bring forward to you all to talk about new goals, a new strategic plan, and so forth. So for me, when I saw this, it validated a lot of the work we're already doing, which is getting ready to bring you all to address these very things right here. Because I remember coming on, Ms. Hugh, I think even it was you that was stated, that strategic plan or design that we had gone through was not very good and didn't get to where you believed we needed to get. And so
I think it was good at the time, and it was the best that we absolutely could do. The way it was put together was masterful. That part was great with massive, huge community input. And I think there was a lot of follow-through on it, but it seemed to have fallen through the cracks maybe.
Well, it came out with 38 things to work on.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to take any more time, Dr. Gibson, but just know that's heading your way soon. And
so the point is that work will address item number 2. Is that fair to say? And tonight's not about the description of that work, but the good thing is this validated something that Dr. Micah was kicking around anyway. This validated that, okay, that was my hunch, and this is going to be a good thing. And if you look at 3, you're going to see a similar, so 3.2 is orange, but what we were just talking about is redoing the good governance inventory at a later date. And when you do that, either 2 times a year or 1 time a year, and you've got a pattern established and you've revisited it, in a systematic way, then 3.2 moves to yes, because we're checking in against the board work on a regular basis. Does that make sense? So the whole thing is just we have to make sure we commit to this inventory or some inventory and do regular check-ins.
I do have a question on that. So does that mean going forward, we just need to make clearer processes so that if we do have a new board member, or if we, obviously this was something that was done in the past, and Ms. Huey is very familiar with it, but we may not have been familiar with the process, and I didn't know what I was not aware of what she's speaking to or the process that went into it. But I think we need to have, going forward, okay, this is what it is. We're all on the same page. We all know what it is. But if there is that transition, and when there is that transition, that we are assured that our newest members are receiving the same sort of information that we had from ground zero.
I think that's a really good point, because when we did the strategic plan all those years ago, it hadn't been that many years. I hate to say that. I mean, I didn't mean it like that. It wasn't 20 years ago. We were really on top of reviewing it on a regular basis. It was a regular part of our agenda, that we reviewed the outcomes, that we looked at where we were with each year of the plan to see if we were checking those boxes. So there was a really good, staff was incredible about keeping us updated on where we were with the strategic plan that was put into place at the time. So but that was in the past. We just haven't done one in a while.
There are several districts right now that I'm working with that had a strategic plan completed 18 months ago, and the pandemic hit. And now we're back to, okay, what did that mean, and can we get it drilled down to some clear objectives?
I was going back to Mrs. Winkley's point and to Mrs. Hughes. I'm the newest board member, and when it comes to like the strategic plan or whatever, it's not there. We've talked about it last time too, but there's certain other ISDs, and it doesn't matter, that on their trustee page, it hits the 4 things: maximize academic performance, recruit, develop talent. It's very clear. And then there's timelines for when they're going to establish the goals. And then the normal progress review, where it's built in. And it's also, the community now has that visibility. So everybody sees what we, the board, are operating and focused on, which obviously student performance, I think, is our primary for everybody, of course. But then all the other associated pieces that feed into that, the recruiting talent, retaining. But I think that would be a way, as we develop the strategic plan for us as the trustees, in cooperation with Dr. Micah, that we say, this is what we, the board, are going to focus on. And then here's going to be our process and timelines. But this one, another district, January 2022, look at certain goals, May 2020, they have very set things. So it holds us accountable to ourselves and the community. Everyone's very aware as we build that strategic calendar. Hey, we're going to do the next checkpoint on the 3-year plan.
Right, and
something like that.
I'm happy to announce, and say I'm the consultant, so I got a chance to take a little sneak peek with the superintendent. You're going to like what's headed your way. I'll just tell you. Is that fair to say, Dr. Micah?
So, no, look, because, but because what it is it's a process for creating exactly what you've described. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. It's to narrow things down. It looks similar to what you had displayed, the 4 kind of key pieces, and then it funneling down. But what it does, a lot of my research in the organizational piece of it, there are organizations that are loosely coupled. So things are loosely out there, but then there are tightly coupled organizations, and that's what you've described. It's here it is, and then these are the markers where we're going to be. And it looks, the way you describe it, it's like a district improvement plan or a campus improvement plan, but it holds everybody to it, and you know when things are coming, and this is that checkpoint to say, yes, we're on track, or no, we're not. And then if we're not, okay, well, is that a poor goal? Is there something need to be redone? So forth and so on, right? So again, that is exactly what's coming to get us to that point. But it's a process.
And Dr. Micah, I know you've talked about this, and I think I just heard you mention, Mr. Hilliard, you said 38 things a while ago. You're going to make a good argument. I'll very seldom say, like, this is the way this needs to be done. I'm like a facilitator, right? You're going to have to make a good argument to me to not collapse 38 or 380 things into student outcomes, staff outcomes, community outcomes, and financial outcomes. Like that's the big stuff. Like that. So whatever objectives are the most important maybe of those 38, when you start collapsing them into those 4, then it starts getting, if we can't do 1,000 things well, what 5 things can we do on each one of those 4 areas that gets the highest point of return?
And if we're trying to do something that doesn't fit into those things, then it's the wrong stuff.
Right. That's exactly right. So now you have a framework to go to the TASB conference and to hear something that sounds really good, but then you're looking at your scorecard going, I just don't see where it fits for our needs. It's good. It was a great presentation. I'm struggling finding where it fits. And to me, that's the beauty of it. And Peter Singy, said, if everything matters in an organization, then nothing matters. And so that's what we're talking about here is the antidote to that, because we find ourselves, especially in education, wanting to be all things to all people, because we're kind of like where everything settles in society. But we have to get some clarity. So anyway, that's headed your way. And again, tonight's not to articulate follow-up actions. I'm just leaving this with you all to do that, but I'm encouraging you to, at a future meeting, list out the follow-up actions, at least on the items that are in orange. Fair enough? And you've got some. So it's just getting clarity around what those are. So moving to 3 real quickly, and this is an interesting. So you had mostly yeses saying that you have board operating guidelines, and that's good. And then on 3.2, we talked about that if you just do this reassessment regularly, then 3.2 kind of self-corrects. So then in 3.3, and you have 6 saying, and I have a feeling that 6 are saying we're data-driven, not the second part of that where it says we align to our expected outcomes. Because it's incongruent to say yes on 3.3 when earlier you said we don't have clarity around our stated outcomes, right? So I'm going to point out that incongruency. I get to do that because I get to get in the car and drive away, So, but I think if you were honest on the second part of 3.3, you would say we need to get this work done on the strategic outcomes for that to truly be a yes. And so anyway, again, the work we talked about, Dr. Micah talked about, will address that. Then item number 4 is kind of interesting because the majority of you said we have a plan, and this is really common. So you do have a plan for advocacy, meaning we do a lot. Okay, what 4.2 and 4.3 are getting at is it systematic, and are we guaranteeing that we're covering everything that needs to be covered? Is a trustee going to a different event to make sure that we have a trustee represented at all the major events? And I like to use my last district as an example for that because it was Schertz, Cibolo, Universal City, and what wasn't in the title, which was the longest name of a school district in Texas, was St. Hedwig, Santa Clara, Converse, part of like 7 other municipalities. And the trustees in SCUC all went to the Schertz chamber and no one else went to any other. And so Universal City and the Metrocom and Selma, they're all saying, hey, what's up? And it turns out the Schertz chamber had the best food. And and that literally was the answer I was given. And so but we had to get systematic about it and literally chart it out of who's going where for the next 90 days to make sure that we didn't miss, and especially y'all have so many different communities, right, within one district, different subsections. We had different municipalities. That was our dividing line. So we had to make sure that we had trustees going to, we were covering all events and to get at this item number 4. Does that make sense? So the fact that you have 6 saying yes on 4.1 means that you support the notion. 4.2 and 4.3 are saying we need to get a tighter process about it. That's my observation. Number 5, you had a 7.0 on team building, which is accurate because you are doing it right now. So you are getting credit for that, and I'm sure you guys have done that. The only other orange, and these make sense in 6, it's not saying that there's not strong physical stewardship. That's not what this is saying. I think in 6, the trustees were a little, like you were more honest about those outcomes are not clear when we go through the budget process. So how do these strategic outcomes that we desire, when are we looking at those when we look at the budget? And I think moving forward, when you get the clarity, that's a natural outcome. Because the first thing you want to make sure you look at are our less than 20 strategic objectives. Do we think that they're fully funded? Yes, sir. Just a stretch. Okay, sorry. I was just checking on you to make sure. Okay. But I don't think there's anything. And the efficiency review on 6.2, I suspect your staff does a lot of that. This is more about making that very clear at the board level, i.e. community level also, all the internal efficiency. Because if they've balanced the budget, I assure you they've done an efficiency review to get the budget balanced. So this is just saying, are we communicating that this is how we went through it? So whatever that looks like, whatever that means, there's 1,000 ways to get there. Y'all got complicated systems in order to do that. It's just distilling that information and making sure that it's clear that this is how we evaluated the efficiency of our budget on any given year. And I'll stop there because that addresses the orange ones, which I'm, again, going to recommend a follow-up conversation on some follow-up actions. This is my job as a consultant, get some follow-up actions on the ones that are in orange that the board agrees to. You know, the board, going back to the strategic role and the tactical role, the board works on the board. Like, that's your work. You work on the board. You oversee the work, the tactical work on the district strategic plan, but the board works on the board. And if I always say that if you're not working on trust and governance, it's going down. It never stays static at some level. You have to constantly be working on both of them. And that's what this work is kind of based on. But with that, President Grona, that's the quick debrief of your good governance inventory.
Does anyone have any questions
I don't have any questions.
or comments?
Just a comment. I think sometimes in the wording or the language in some of these makes you think twice. And for clarity, if you will, because the first part you may agree with, but then when there's kind of like a two-parter
Yeah, several
there
of them
or
have a
three-parter
two.
there,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah, we do the first part, but I'm not sure we do parts 2 and 3. So I'm going to put don't know
Right.
or no, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so,
I absolutely do. If it makes, every word in the inventory is there for a reason. So all parts count, and it was a way to keep a common thought from that work, the governance core, in one question instead of you having 4 different questions where they clustered together.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if we truly understood and we had this 3 to 5 year plan and we knew it from beginning to end and what the outcomes, the expectations, we would know how to answer these questions, and it wouldn't necessarily be a one that doesn't affect part 2 and 3 because they really are all together.
I absolutely believe, and to think that the board would have 20 outcomes memorized, might be a stretch, but to have 4 overarching priorities is not committed to memory. Then, my thought was, and you've talked about a scorecard, Dr. Micah, the beauty of that is if it goes beyond those 4 and you're reaching somewhere to grab the scorecard to, see which strategic objective we're talking about. And I think that's fair. When Robert Westbrook was getting ready to go to the TASB convention and he was saying, give me 50 of those scorecards, that's a good sign, because and I know Robert, it's because he doesn't want to answer a question. He wants to say here, it's right there. It's number 3.1. But at the same time, there was clarity. He knew where it fit, and that's what this work should do. Like it's almost a filter in y'all's mind of when stuff is coming in, like where does that fit in our strategic direction? And not everything fits. And I think that was said earlier, and that's big, that concept. If it doesn't fit, then maybe it's not something we chase. It's important, but it's not important enough to be our key work for the district. We find ourselves just playing whack-a-mole because someone brings it up and we think we've got to build a process around it. And it's not to say that we're going to stop listening. In fact, it should all be about listening, and superintendent's been doing a lot of listening lately on a listening tour. But you need to have a framework for when you do your listening. Where does it fit into the framework?
I had a question. The clear communication process that was part of that, are we going to talk about that? Because I thought this was a great whole contract and idea, or is that going to be something that we're going to incorporate?
I think that could, President Gronin and I did talk about that. I think that could be a good follow-up conversation for you all to have. It would address a couple of things that I saw on the SWOT, and then maybe a couple of things on the good governance inventory. It was in the original
Oh, okay.
packet, I
I
think.
didn't bring
got copies of it. It was just
Okay.
the comm matrix for the weekly update everybody has access to. We all see what everyone else is seeing all the time, real time, but.
I think that would, and we've had a follow-up conversation, that would address several, it would hit on several of the items in the inventory and the SWOT.
And then the last question, I guess, for all of us is what's our action plan going forward? Because obviously we meet a limited amount of times, and this is gonna take some time to start working through this stuff, but kind of to start addressing some of these and building stuff. I know obviously Dr. Mike has got some pieces that he would obviously like to include, but for us, because we're gonna have to sit down and talk about which items we're gonna start addressing in what order. So we're gonna, if we're gonna do that tonight, or we're gonna have to do that here, but just, we only meet once or twice a month, so. Time quickly go.
Speaking to that, did you all get to the section about the different superintendents and when they had the scenarios? And they talked about the 1 hour meetings before their meetings and the
Discussion.
discussion groups that they had. And I that was very interesting to me. And I thought, the other part too is I thought, how many meetings are they only having one meeting a month? And are their meetings only, their board meetings only an hour or two long? Because if, our meetings go long, like how? We'd have to be here at 4:30 or 4 o'clock to be able to have that kind of a session prior to a board meeting that our board meetings last till 9:30 at night.
Well, and that goes to the other point you made. That's a very good point, because they talked about, are some meetings more administrative, agenda driven, because we do have to take care of administrative, but then how much is it focused at the strategic level? Like, I mean, we have to obviously do some of the appreciation recognitions, absolutely, but like, how do we streamline so that we're focusing at the strategic level on the big rocks that we decide with whatever the strategic plan is, and not get caught in the day-to-day. Once again, we still have to pass stuff, but do the updates, but really stick at that higher level, and to not also be here for numerous hours, because yes, in a big district, I'm guessing those are smaller districts, I'm not sure.
No,
but
Steve, they were the largest
I don't know how they're doing that then,
in
or-
their district, like in their part of the world, in their part of the U.S.
Yeah.
I think it was California, Oregon.
And in South Carolina, I think was the other one.
They were one of the largest districts.
I just don't know how they were
If not
having
the
robust
largest.
discussion then, and being able to go back and forth to get
Well,
that.
and
That's-
so a big district and a small district generally have the longest agendas. Because the small, they're picking the paint color, so we have to get them out of picking the paint color for the junior high locker room, girl, whatever, soccer. And then there's just so many moving parts going on. And don't take this as flippant, but I mean, it's your agenda. And so the way you structure it that's your choice. And if you want to front load recognition and strategic thought, then you need to do that. And then find the way to utilize the consent agenda or streamline processes to get some of the day-to-day things, minimized with one vote. That's my opinion. I've been asked to stand in front of you and share that tonight. So, but whatever you want front-loaded, you need to front-load.
Well, I think that we do use our consent agenda. I think we've done a good job of putting a lot of that day-to-day
That's
stuff
great.
in there. And Dr. Mike and I have also talked about, a lot of times when it's the resolution for School Nurses Week or whatever, that doesn't have to come to the board for approval. So there are some changes that we could make to our agenda for that. But the flip side to that is we do want to recognize people. We want to recognize employees. We want to so what's the balance? So there hadn't been a decision made about that, but that was just something that we had talked about, because we had talked about our board meetings they run long, and is there a way to?
I am familiar with some districts that do have 2 meetings a month, and one is a work studies type session where there's no voting done. And everything is discussed and gone over. at that work session, then the actual business meeting portion, almost everything is in consent. It's already been discussed. It's already been, questions have been answered. And so it's consent and it's done, very quickly. There may be some items that, come up in between because they're usually like 2 weeks apart. And that again is usually like the larger districts, like, I think Houston might do it and some of the others. But their meetings also start like at noon.
Oh.
So, there are still a couple of districts that have committees where each board member is assigned to 1 or 2 or 3 committees. No more than 3 board members
Right.
are officially part of it, so there is no quorum. And they are posted and they're open, but so if it has gone to committee, whether it's facilities or whatever, and the board members discuss it in committee, then you are trusting that as it comes to the main agenda for the business meeting, that it already has been, everything has been reviewed and discussed and is cleared for board approval. So it's like you hear a motion, well, that this was, no second is required type of thing. So that's how TASB operates.
I would just kind of caution to make sure that we have transparency so that we don't have folks saying, well, they didn't know or they wasn't privy to the discussion and we're just passing things on consent because
Now,
we've already...
those committee meetings are open.
Okay.
Anyone can attend, and the other trustees can attend also. So anyone may attend. That's the way they operate that I'm familiar with. So anyone can be part of those discussions. It's not, they are not closed.
I'm just saying they probably won't attend. Like a lot of folks don't even attend the board meeting until there's an issue. And even though they know they can attend all the board meetings.
But I do like the committee idea. You're talking about, I saw where there's a North Central one. They have 3 that are on the policies. So when they do all the local policies, and they have 3 that do all the construction stuff. And then, but because it's not a quorum, and they come and then they provide the open notes, everyone's aware, and they answer questions. But they get down with the staff where they're getting all that other legwork that takes a lot of time up here. Plus you have time to go back and forth, whereas we get presented stuff and we're making decisions sometimes with only having the weekend to have looked at it or get additional information. I think that may be a great strategy for us, especially if we're going to start doing that systematic review of our policies and updating stuff. It's part of the strategic plan is figuring out who is interested in what and maybe doing that. That's accepted and considered at least.
Northeast did have it many, many years ago, like maybe 30 years ago. They did have committees. But as I understand it, they moved away from it because of the time for staff to run these was immense. It really takes, you have to have dedicated staff time just to hold a special meeting just for a specific subject, whether it's, like you said, curriculum or policy or whatever. So it does eat up a lot of staff time, so.
Possibly, or consider a way to make it focus, because you're right, we have to give consideration, but just different ideas, fresh ideas to look at stuff.
It is a way, though, for at least 3 people to dig down deeper into subjects, so that's the flip side of it, yeah.
I do think that there is a balance that needs to be, I think you talked about that right now, you touched on that needs to be found between, having meaningful and powerful discussion, right? And then what we need to do as a board, like business-wise, and then also for recognition. I think that we don't have an immediate answer to that, but I think we need to keep discussing about that because I do think it's important for us to discuss, and I'm not saying we're going to discuss for all hours of the night because that's not what we want to do, but there is something to be said about meaningful discussion and then building, which builds trust, which builds, more transparency, and I think that's important. I think we need to really kind of like look into that and visit that.
Okay. Anything else?
There was one other question, and I noticed it come up 2 or 3 times, and that was about a board calendar. And I know in the past we had a specific calendar that defined a year of, like, in January, the agenda would include this, this, or this. February. Now, Okay.
Miss Huey.
Having said that, it was normally the board president and the superintendent. So I remember when I was board president that I sat down with the superintendent and he explained to me in January, this is what we're gonna be going over. And so it was a defined calendar that I hadn't seen it in a while, but I'm assuming that Ms. Grona did. So that,
No, because we just created it.
okay. We've had them in the past. I know we did.
So what it is really taking a look. We went back, over several years worth of agendas, and just found those things that came up year after year, and then put them in here. Mr. Hilliard, you had brought it up, and so that's actually in here.
Okay, I know that TASB has some in their,
Like a sample.
they have 2 or 3 different varieties of calendars that we may have used way back then to define whatever. But I know that there was a calendar when I was board president because that was how we knew what was coming up. And I know it's been there since then too, because I can recall other board presidents talking about it. So probably just something that got lost in our transition of people.
Okay. All right, anything else about the good governance or any other?
So all this good conversation, and then I think when I think Dr. Micah and President Grona were going to look at maybe populating some of the follow-up actions on the orange ones that are underway, and then just bring that back to the board. I think to your question earlier, I think that's a really good approach. And then any conversation like that just occurred, or whatever that may drive, is the board working on being a better board. And it cannot be a bad conversation if it's the board working on staying in the strategic role, and what does that look like, and how are we defining that? Not just, are we a good board, and everybody, thumbs up. We're quantifying it, and we're working on it, and because we want to be the best board. And that's what Fullen and the other name escapes me in the book. That's what they were talking about. How are you clear? Who's the other? Campbell. Thank you. I was drawing a blank. Senior moment. But you have to be clear about it, and you just can't expect that to just occur through osmosis. It has to be through systematic review and commitment. And I haven't looked at your board operating guidelines, but I know a lot of districts that we're working with right now have like the structure for how a board meeting works and things like that embedded in the board operating guidelines, which is good. That's what should be in there. What they don't have is, so it's almost like these are the rules. I think it should start with, this is the kind of board we want to be. This is the strategic role. Like some of them are adopting the strategic, tactical, and operational role as part of their board operating guidelines. Like we want that. That's the structure we want, and we want to annually adopt that. And then we're going to commit to taking a good governance inventory once a year for us to check, to make sure we're staying on track, just like we're going to ask the district to make sure they're staying on track vis-a-vis a balanced scorecard, for the district. So anyway, those are just some thoughts for the board operating guidelines.
So you think that good governance review should be annually?
Well, some districts initially are doing it more than annually, but at least annually.
Okay.
And I think that they were looking for maybe a quick check in 6 months to just see where they were, and then to try to normalize it to an annual. I mean, I personally think that if you review the board operating guidelines once a year, and if you take the good governance inventory once a year, that's a lot of work, because the superintendent and board president can barely get things done in response to those, before it's time to take it again. But I do think those two things are really powerful. Annual review of the board operating guidelines, and retake your good governance inventory and have a follow-up conversation. And those could be done in conjunction with each other, actually. It would make sense kind of for them to be done in conjunction with each other.
Oh, at the same time.
Yeah, just so you've retaken the good governance inventory, and then been provided with the board operating guidelines. And as we're debriefing the good governance inventory, we're also looking at our board operating guidelines to make sure we've got everything in there that needs to be in there.
Okay.
Just a thought.
No, it's good. Good thought. Any other good thoughts? I'm taking notes.
Yeah. I think you've hit on a lot of good thoughts tonight. The most important one is get some follow-up actions in the orange one and start to work on it. And nothing can go wrong. I mean, really, seriously. And I think a lot of those yellows, just the processes that we're talking about are going to take care of those yellows. I really do. So I wouldn't even necessarily look at the yellows right now.
Okay. All right, so does anybody have anything else? If not, we're going to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074, a discussion regarding board evaluation and training related to performance duties, and the time is 6:30. The board will now reconvene into open session. The time is 7:49. Item 5, adjournment. The time is 7:49.